Luke Mathers, welcome to the podcast.
G'day, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. And Luke, you and I followed a somewhat similar trajectory, which is not the norm. We're both ODs. People will discover by your accent you are Australian, but we both chose the field of optometry and branched into different areas. And I'll let you give people some background on you, but you chose to lean into a topic that's extremely important. And I think it doesn't get nearly enough attention, especially in the healthcare community: stress and burnout. You even wrote a book. You've got a few of them, but you've got one really want to lean into today. It's called Stress Teflon. And if you don't mind, could you just explain your journey and tell us a little bit about that book and what got you interested in that topic?
Yeah, it's a weird journey. I took a bit longer than you. I was an OD or an optometrist for 27 years. I actually did the maths. I've asked which one's clearer, this one or that one, 9.5 million times. So I'm sure a few of you people listening could probably do the maths, and I think a few of them probably even got more than that. And there was a little point that I got to, and I I owned a business with a company in Australia, which were really huge, and I owned one of them in the UK, and then they came to Australia, and they're just massive. They've just exploded since they got here, and I was part of that first run, and it was amazing. And one of the things that happened about, it probably would have been about 7 or 8 years into that journey. I'd set all of these goals for myself. I really wanted to do more than $5 million a year. And I'd set sights on this is what I wanted. And okay, let's go. And probably a bit like yourself, Steve, one of those people that sort of when you set something and you have a clear goal to go towards, it's like, let's do it. And did it. And I'm sure you probably had this as well. At some stage, you've sort of wanted to get to the top of a certain mountain and got there and then gone, okay, yeah, what now? Has that happened to you?
Absolutely. And I've heard from many high achievers who, even athletes who've got to a certain level, won the Super Bowl, became world class in whatever their sport is, and within minutes of it being over, they ask the question, "What now?"
Yeah. And there's almost a little, I call it top of the mountain syndrome. And you see it in a lot of places. In the States, it's really important what college you get into. And that's the whole goal, to get into a college. And then you're in the college and you realize, okay, I'm here now. It's not everything it's cracked up to be. Same with in business goals, to do that. And one of the things that happened at this stage, I went to my doctor, I went to my general practitioner and said, my business is good, my wife's good, my daughter's good, life's going all right, I'm having fun, but I'm just meh. I'm just a bit languishing a little bit. And he asked two or three pretty uninsightful questions and prescribed me an antidepressant, right? And I'm the least depressed person you're ever going to meet in your life. Yeah, it's just not me. But I took them and actually felt better and went, holy shit, what's going on here? And decided, okay, well, let's have a look and see what these things do. So he gave me a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, so an SSRI. And so I went, okay, well, what's this serotonin business? I didn't know anything about this at the time. And it took me down a rabbit hole of evolutionary biology on why humans do the things we do. And the thing I came up with was stress. The thing about it is that we've got to be able to embrace the good parts of stress. We've got to be able to embrace the challenges and let the bad parts and the toxic part of stress slide off. And I think one of the things in society, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this, is that we've got stress and we've put it all into a bucket and said stress is bad. And I don't think it is. I actually think there's some really, really good parts of stress that we need to embrace, but we also need to get rid of the toxic stuff. And that's what Stress Teflon's all about: being able to embrace the good parts of stress and being able to let the toxic parts slide off.
We need stress to some degree, but we struggle to deal with it. We struggle to process it. And I think this is something that's pretty ubiquitous in all people. And that's what I really want to get into today. I don't think anybody listening to this is thinking, how do I get rid of stress? But rather, how do I better manage it? And you said something when we talked last week, and it really got me to think. I think we were talking about burnout, and I gave you a couple statistics I had heard, and you sort of stopped me and you said we have to be careful with the term burnout because a lot of times what we're experiencing as burnout is actually what you describe bored out, but they feel very
Yeah,
much the same. Can you elaborate on that? Because I, when you said that, I went, hmm. And I'll share my story with that you and how that why that connected with me. But I'm interested if you could elaborate on that term bored out.
yeah, it probably goes back to a little bit of that top of the mountain syndrome. That sort of life is a sort of series of steps. And every now and then you end up on a certain step, and it was a step you wanted to get to. You really wanted to get that business, or you really wanted to get into that school, or you really wanted that job. But then once you've been there for a while, things like hedonic adaptation and stuff like that can make you feel a little bit agitated. All right. And I call that an agitated squiggle. So when you're agitated, but everything's okay, but you're just not quite sure why something's wrong. And I think as optometrists sitting in a 3 by 3 room for 8 hours a day asking which one's clearer, number one or number two, there's an element of that after you've done it for quite a few years, it's very hard to find a challenge in it. And we need that challenge stress. We need to have the stress of a challenge. So I think there's three ways that burnout, what we call burnout. I think there's actually three different things that you need to get the diagnosis right to work out what the treatment is. And burnout is real. Don't get me wrong. There are people that are burned out. And burned out is when I have way too much to do, not enough support, and not enough time. All right. So burnout's real. I haven't got enough time to do all the things I need to get done. And you meet a lot of ODs around the place. Do you find that that's a real thing for quite a few of them?
Yeah, and I'll continue, but I want to share with you my story quickly on why I felt both sides of that, the burnout and the bored out. But continue with where you were
Well,
going.
well, the bored out, and when you're burnt out, you need rest. All right, and you need to get a cadence of rest, sort of little bits of rest every day in different parts, little bits every week, little bits every month, holidays every year. So burnout needs rest. Bore out is different. Bore out is I don't have a challenge here and I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling stuck, I'm feeling like I'm not firing up about anything. And the hassle is if you're bored out and you have rest, that's not going to help. That's not going to help anything. If you're bored out, what you need is a challenge. And that might be a business challenge, all right? It might be a challenge outside. You might want to go and run a marathon, or you might want to take up golf or pickleball or whatever else you want to do. But you need a challenge. So when you're bored out, you need a challenge. And that might come from a business sense or it might come from something else. So you see almost straight away, one of them needs rest. One of them, rest is the worst thing that can happen for them. They need a challenge. And the other one is checked out. And checked out is real because what happens with checked out is I've decided that these people I'm working with, I don't want to work with them anymore. They're stressing me out. And when you're checked out, most of the time it's because you haven't been able to have a difficult conversation. I haven't been able to ask my business partner what I wanted. I haven't been able to talk to my manager about what I need and that sort of stuff. And so checkout is about the people around you. And I've decided I'm not safe in this tribe anymore. And checkout needs a difficult conversation. It needs to have an honest conversation where everything's put on the table and being able to work out exactly what you both want. So there's sort of, burnt out, I don't have enough time, bored out, I don't have enough challenges. And checkout is I don't feel safe in my tribe and need to have a conversation to sort of get that right. And so you can see from those three, you've got to get your diagnosis right before you can work out what to do. You can't just go and do yoga classes and do some breathing exercises and you're going to fix it up because that's not going to help bore out and it's not going to help check out.
So when you first brought that up and you said you kind of distinguishing between burnout and bored out, I thought, well, that's really interesting. And just a quick summary of my scenario and what I thought about when you said that is first I went to a lot of the doctors that I work with. And if someone were to say to them, "Oh, you're just bored, you're not burned out," they'd be feeling the same way I felt like, yeah, I got a lot of stuff to do. There's billing, there's lab orders, there's ordering contact lenses. One of my opticians just quit. And I felt that. I carried that weight when I was practicing. But if I'm being really honest, people ask me a lot now, why did you step away from patient care? My first reaction, the first thing I'll typically say, I got bored with it. So I was very much feeling both. So I suppose it's possible we could have
Oh, you
both.
can feel both for sure. Absolutely, you can. And all three of them aren't mutually exclusive. Having trouble with your business partner and having not enough time and feeling bored about that, you can have them all, but you've got to be able to work out which is the dominant one and address that. So, because one of the things about it, I remember going back to that conversation with the GP and giving me the Lexapro, the antidepressants. One of the things that we get from serotonin, and this is from like thousands and thousands of years ago, it's built into evolutionary biology, is that one of the things we need from that is the safety of a tribe. And to have the safety of a tribe, and it's amazing. Something like iDoc is great because the beauty of iDoc is you can be an independent OD and you can be an independent optometrist and you have all the autonomy that goes along with that. But with iDoc, you get the buying power, you get the HR support, you get all of that, 2,000 other ODs to actually be able to call upon and be able to have that safety of a tribe. And so you need that safety of a tribe. And one of the things about that is you also need to contribute. You also need to feel like, here's a question for you, Steve. Is the world a better place because Steve's in it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely it is, yeah. The world has to be a better place
Oh, you're
because
talking
you're
about
in it.
me. Okay, yeah, I guess maybe
Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, no, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Well, I've talked to you a couple of times now, and my world's better from talking to you. And one of the things about it, because of the repetitive nature of testing eyes, we can sometimes lose track of that's a human on the other side and not eyeballs. And one of the things that happened after I sort of had this epiphany about what serotonin is, it's about that connection and that contribution to my tribe. So what I did then is I went back into my business the next day and I sat down and wrote down what are the things I love about being an optometrist. What do I think I love about that? I love connecting with patients and solving problems. I love watching my staff get better. In my Specsavers practice, I had 15 different people that started work with me that now own their own practices, right? And there are things you might sit on your rocking chair when you're 90 and you might think, oh, that was great. We were the first to do 100,000 in a week. And you'll go, yeah, that's okay. When you think I've touched 15 different families and made 15 different people business owners and thriving in their careers, that's a rocking chair moment. That's that pride from contribution. Now, yeah, I'm Australian. We have weird ways of describing things, but it's almost like weeing in a wetsuit. It feels really, really warm and fuzzy, and it just lights you up from inside. And we need that, and we can get that in the test room as well. Being able to just take a few minutes, and if we go looking for freckles on the iris serrata, we might be able to find one of them occasionally. And you go, okay, that's good. I'm glad I've been able to help that person. But if you get excited about Mrs. Jones and you learn all you can about petunias because Mrs. Jones loves petunias, then all of a sudden you're connecting with Mrs. Jones. And there's a business case for that. That likability is a really, really good tool of influence. And being able to ask questions and learn more about that person, not just about their eyes and how they see, actually made me love optometry again. And I had another 7 or 8 years of being an optometrist in the test room because I made sure I stopped and embraced the person and embraced the contribution that you did from being an optometrist. And I also embraced the tribe that I was in. I made sure I put more effort into my staff. I put more effort into my colleagues in different practices. Because there's something weird about that. We can get a little bit selfish these days. One of there's a great book called The Social Paradox by a friend of mine called Bill von Hippel, who's a evolutionary psychologist, and he said that there's a balance between autonomy and connection. And I want to do what I want to do on one hand, and I want to connect with other people on another hand. And something like iDoc's really good with that because it gives you the connection of being part of a big tribe, but you still don't have to lose your autonomy. And I think that's a really, really cool thing as well. But that, connection is all about being able to link with other people, but it's also about contributing. And one of the things when you've done something and you're bored out because you've done it 9.5 million times is you forget that you're actually helping someone. And we need to stop and actually take a bit of notice of that.
I want to talk about that connection because I do think it's the thing that so many of us get into healthcare in the first place, but it's also something that we can lose as things become more hectic in the workplace. And you referred to this as getting checked out. And what they've found in a lot of the research, specifically on burnout, is that what causes burnout and what brings us back to a state that we're actually happy again. And a lot of our assumptions, you mentioned it before, yoga, meditation, exercise, man, all really important. I would encourage anybody to do those things, but a very modest effect on burnout because anyone who's ever gone on vacation for 2 weeks, put your, feet on the beach, a couple of cocktails, right? Life is great. You come back and it takes about zero point 0.7 seconds when you walk through that door and all the problems come flooding back. One of the hallmark signs of burnout is something called depersonalization, which aligns really closely with what you call as checked out, is we lose that ability to meaningfully connect with patients when we're just bouncing from room to room. When Miss Smith in the room two, who's the accountant with two kids and runs marathons, when we're stressed out, when we're burned out and depersonalization kicks in, then Miss Smith just becomes the red eye in room two. And we start to
Yeah.
lose that connection. And that really magnifies the burnout. So if you could speak to that, what would for all the ODs that are feeling that way, when I got into this, I felt the connections, I felt the closeness with my patients, and I don't feel it anymore because you could be burned out, it could be bored, it likely a combination of both. But how do we start to get back to that in a practice in this day and time where things are very hectic, very busy, a lot of administrative work, a lot of regulatory oversights and paperwork and forms and staff turnover and all the things that we've got to deal with? How do we get back to that where it's just you, the patient, and a sense of purpose in what we're doing?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of it is I've got a thousand ways I could go here, but part of it is we've got to make sure there's room in your stress bucket. One of the hassles is if you're burnt out and you're overflowing and you've got all of this stuff to do, your brain actually can't take that moment to connect. And the hassle is that's, this thing's called eyes on business. And for a business point of view, that's terrible because the person that you're sitting opposite is going to realize that you're not connecting with them and they're going to go elsewhere. They're less likely to buy. Your conversion rate's going to be lower because you actually haven't connected with that person and you haven't been able to influence them. Because likability, in the past, we've been able to use authority. I'm the OD, this is what you need, go and buy it. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that's as effective as it used to be. I think we're a little bit more wary of authority now. And so we've got to be able to pull some other levers of influence. And likability is huge. So the business case for that is good. But the warm fuzzy case for that's pretty good as well. You want to be able to enjoy your day and you want to be able to do that. So I think one question that would be really good to ask anyone if they're thinking about being burnout is what thing are you doing that you could pay someone $20 an hour to do? What bit of administrative stuff? What things can you get off your plate that you could actually empower someone else to do? And there's quite a few optometrists that I've met along the journey that are a little bit control freaky. They like everything done exactly how they like it. And so to be able to relinquish control of some of that stuff actually then decreases the level in your bucket and gives you a bit of room to be able to connect. Because when you're full and when your brain's full, you don't have any bandwidth to be able to connect with people. So there's a great idea of, are we more resilient? Are the younger generation more resilient or less resilient than older generations? What do you think about that? What's your gut interpretation of that, Steve? What do you think?
Define resilient in this sense.
Um, Being able to handle more things that come their way, being able to bounce back from adversity, being able to deal with hard stuff. Are we more or less resilient than we were a generation ago?
I feel like
You
we're
look deep in
less.
thought.
I
Yeah.
feel like
Okay.
we're well, I because you could think of this different ways, but I think back to, like my grandparents that didn't have all the support around them for a lot of
Yeah.
the things that we can get answers quickly. We can get healthcare quickly. They had to fight through. I mean, my grandfather was in the Depression, fought in a war, and had to develop mechanisms to be able to deal and come back from that. So I suppose you could look at this either way, but my sense is we just have more support, more tools, more hacks around us to be able to deal with these things where previous generations didn't have access to.
Well, your grandfather came home from the war and it would have taken 10 years before he had a hot shower.
Right.
No one had a hot shower before the 60s. You know what I mean? So these, and I look at it and think they were way more resilient than what, say, a Gen Z or a millennial is. And a friend of mine, Adam Fraser, did the research on this, and there's no difference. They're just as resilient. What's happening in the later generations is we don't have a resilience problem, we have a recovery problem. We're not actually recovering well enough. So getting a cadence of recovery is a way to empty that bucket so that when you do get in and you're sitting in front of the accountant with the two kids who runs marathons, you can actually connect with her. If your bucket's full, it's hard to connect. So we've got to actually make sure the time we get away from our office, we're actually doing things that bring us joy and fill our joy bucket and empty our stress bucket. And so I think that's very important, that we've got to actually recover on purpose. But I had a little, almost like a little ritual that I would do. I would get the board that had the patient's details. And as I've done the handover to whoever was going to do the dispense for me, I've walked out to get the next board. And in that walk, which was only about 5 meters, I would always ask myself, did I connect with that person? Did I sort out what their problems were? And are they better because they came and saw me? And it's amazing, even just that 4-second walk to go and get the next board, just reinforce that, yes, I want to connect. I want to look after that person and my business is about them. And the moment I did that, I actually didn't feel bored out as much. I didn't feel like I'd checked out. I felt like I was, there's a great line I love called "Be where your feet are." And if your feet are in the room with a patient, be in the room with a patient and learn about petunias, learn about what it's like to train for a marathon. And if we can do that, I actually think we learn to love optometry. I know I did. I learned to love optometry again. And when I did that, my business actually got better. When I was a bit bored out and when I was a bit checked out, my numbers weren't as good as they were. My profitability wasn't as good as it should have been. But the moment I actually connected with the person sitting in the room and they were just a red eye in room 2 was the moment my business got good again. Because it was always good in the past. I just had a year or two where I didn't put my heart and soul in it. I didn't like it and I didn't do as well. That happiness is a great business hack. So how do we actually find the joy in what we're doing? And I think a lot of that is to get rid of the stuff that actually doesn't bring you any joy, get rid of a lot of that administration stuff, that compliance stuff. Find someone that can do that for you and be able to, be in the room. We don't want to see the red eye in room 2. We want to see the girl with the accountant with the 2 kids who runs marathons.
There's an emotional and a business component to this, and I think you're alluding to both. And if you lean into the research, what you just described really is the antidote to burnout. It's not getting away from patient care, but it's getting back to the patients. It's just I call it the second job, all the administrative stuff that's chipping away at our time. But a really interesting book. You mentioned a book before. I'll mention a book called Compassionomics, because I was talking to somebody once who is an expert in this field, and I said, "Yeah, all that compassion, empathy stuff. It's a shame we can't quantify it." And she goes, "Well, there is a couple doctors that wrote a book, and they studied thousands of research papers, and they were able to do a really good job of quantifying the impact of compassion on patients." So you'll hear sometimes doctors, as this conversation's taking place, I read some of the social media threads and, how much time do you spend with patients? I'm in and out. They don't care about that. They just want their glasses. No, actually, they do feel it. You mentioned before not having the bandwidth. You hit it right on the head there. When we're stressed out, when we're burned out, we just have nothing left to give to the patient, and we don't. And the thing is, the patient feels it too. And it's not always a bad experience as much as they're just not feeling a strong sense of understanding, of listening, all the things that are really important to them.
You're not present. You're not where your feet
You're not
are.
present. Yeah.
And presence and purpose are huge. My purpose is to be here for you. And the moment you make that, people hear your content, they hear the words that you say. And a friend of mine has a great expression. She says, people hear your content, but they smell your intent. And if your intention is to see if I can get a pair of glasses out of you and make some money, they'll smell that. If your intent is to, I want to find the best solution for your visual needs so that your, eyes aren't a problem in your life and you're going to be sorted out with everything you need to see, they'll smell that too. So it's about, is it about them? And if your purpose is about the person sitting on the other side of the chair, that's not a red eye in room two. And I think that actually decreases a lot of the burnout because I'm actually here to help and I'm noticing that I'm helping. I think that's a really important thing that I think we brush over a little bit too quickly. But it's something that purpose is massive. There's one of the things I talked about being stressed Teflon is you've got to have a thing called eudaimonia. And this isn't new. The Stoics were talking about this 2,500 years ago. And it's living a life of objective flourishing by having virtue and contribution and doing good things. And I think as ODs, as optometrists, we get to do that, but we don't take notice of that anymore. And I think that awareness that we're actually helping is a really, really cool thing to have.
And you've referred to, as you said, be where your feet are. Is that what you said before? And be with the patient in the room. I like how you tied it back, because to tie this back to something you asked at the start of this conversation was, have you ever accomplished something and then got there and then thought to yourself, what next? And something that I've learned, it took me a long time. I still struggle with it sometimes because we all want goals, right? We all want to aspire for things.
Yep.
But yes, I referenced athletes and other high achievers, but I've certainly felt that way at times. I worked so hard to get this and now I got it. And now what? But what I've
That's
had
top of the
to
mountain
learn,
syndrome.
yeah, and what I've had to learn more is to enjoy the journey. And when I look back on so many things, I realized, you know what? What I really enjoyed was not accomplishing the thing as much as the journey, putting in the work, the ups, the downs, those moments of adversity, those moments of overcoming something. But if I'm doing something and sometimes I'll ask myself, am I enjoying this? And if the answer is no, I really need to rethink my intentions, because I'm aware now if I accomplish this thing, that's going to be a short-lived sense of joy. So make sure whatever you're doing, you get some kind of sense of joy out of it, because it's the journey that usually we're going to remember. That's what gives us that sense of purpose.
Yeah, you use the word awareness then, and there's sort of three parts to becoming stressed Teflon. The first part is honest self-awareness, to be able to ask yourself those questions. And we've actually discovered, there's a guy called Ethan Kross from University of Chicago who discovered or Michigan University, sorry, who's discovered some really cool stuff. That if we talk to ourselves in the third person, we actually use a different part of our brain. So by saying, come on, Luke, what are you doing here? Are you present? Are you doing the best work you can? That actually
Chatter,
connects
right?
our, yeah, Chatter. It's a great
Yeah,
book.
I was like, how do I know that guy?
And
Yeah.
yeah, Ethan Kross. He wrote another book called Shift, which is amazing on how to shift your emotions. But one of the things I do in the workshops that I run in businesses now is I do a thing called Finding Carlos. And Carlos is the better version of me. All right. Luke might be a little bit flippant. Luke might sort of be a little bit irresponsible and a bit disorganized. But Carlos is the better version of me. I walked down the beach this morning to check the surf and there was a bit of rubbish on the ground. Luke might have stepped over it. Carlos picked it up and put it in the bin. All right, he's the better version of me. And when you get really clear about what that looks like, that turns up every day. And for the last 4 or 5 years, once I made a considered effort that I wanted to be present in my practice, I used to have a doorway as I entered the shopping centre. We have big shopping centres in Australia and our optometry business is in that. And as I walked through this big doorway, I would say to myself, okay, Carlos, how are you going to turn up today? And I worked out what the characteristics were of me at my best. And at me and my best, I was curious, creative, and generous. So if I'm curious about my patients, creative about finding solutions, and generous with my time and my energy to my staff, I was turning up as the best version of me and I was loving life and my business thrived again. When I wasn't turning up and when I was walking in there kicking stones, every person that walked in got the same sense and my business was really terrible. So having that right mindset and having that clarity of what is the best version of me and how can that turn up every day and how do I get a cadence of recovery, and how do I find things in my life that have joy. So that awareness of how I'm turning up is the first one. So there's an ABC to this. The other part is belonging. You've got to feel like you belong. All right. And something like iDoc is great for that, because you don't have to give away your autonomy. You can still run an independent business, but you're part of something bigger and you're getting better deals and all of that sort of stuff, which is great. And that's why people sign up. But I think they stay there because of people like yourself, Steve, and the fact that you have a tribe that you can call on. Because running a business by yourself is pretty lonely. So we need the safety of a tribe, we need to belong, and we need to contribute. Those two are really good, really important. And the last one we need to have is curiosity. You ask, what am I doing here before? To be curious about what I'm doing, how it's serving me, and how else I can do it. How can I, I wrote another book called Curious Habits. And Curious Habits is basically about things that aren't necessarily bad, but have we got curious about, are they the best way to do it? And getting curious about how you're running your business is a really cool thing. So if we have awareness, belonging, and including that in contribution, and curiosity about how to do things better, I think we're going to have businesses that thrive. And we're going to get that eudaimonia, that idea of objective flourishing because we're doing good stuff. And I think that's the key to not making stress stick.
Interesting you mentioned the book Chatter, because I've actually been following the author recently, and he gives several different strategies for dealing with some of this. And if you're listening to this and you're like me, and sometimes you feel like you got 75 ping pong balls bouncing around in your head at the same time, obviously the title of that book, it caught my attention. But one of the things that has really worked well for me is just asking yourself, is this going to matter a year from now? And maybe it's 10 years from now, but in most cases, the answer is no. The thing you're worried about today, is this going to matter a year from now? And in most cases, it's
It's
not.
going to
So
matter a day from now.
it may not matter a day
You know
from
what
now.
I mean?
And it's probably not going to happen. Here, the thing is, like, 95% of the things you worry about never come true. And what I've found, and I'm not discounting people that
There's
have been
actually,
through
I know the
tragedies.
exact numbers on this. It's
Yeah, I'm
85% of
making
things that you worry
85.
about
Okay.
don't come true. 12% of them do come true, but it doesn't have the adverse effect that you thought it was. Only 3% of things you worry about come true and have the adverse thing that you worried about. 3%. So 3 out of 100 of the things that you worry about come true and have the adverse consequences. So, that's as far as chatter goes and that self-talk goes, to be able to say, okay, there's 1 in 33 chance that this is going to go true. How
Yeah.
much bandwidth should I give that?
And how many things have happened that you were worried about? It ended up being something good. I mean, how many things
Yeah.
have happened? You're like, oh, I lost that job. But you look back a year later and say, well, if I never lost that job, if I never got dumped by that person, right, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have found this other person, this other job. So I've heard the human mind before described as an asshole.
Yes.
And it
Yeah,
kind
Sam
of
Harris said
is.
that in one of his books. The voice in my head is an asshole, and
Yeah.
it's really, yeah, like if anyone talked to me the way I sometimes talk to me, I'd probably punch him in the head, and I'm not a violent person. But and often to be able to do that, to be able to say to ourselves, if we have a look at, I love brains. Brains are a wonderful thing, and our old brain, our emotional brain, our limbic system doesn't have words. Doesn't have words for things. It doesn't have language. It has feelings. You know that thing where you meet someone, you think, they're a little bit dodgy, but you can't quite put your finger on it. That's because your old brain, your limbic system's ringing alarm bells saying there's something dodgy about this guy. All right. The new brain is where your language is. So being able to talk to yourself in the third person and say, come on, Steve, what are you doing here? And I actually go another step and talk to myself in the third person as my alter ego, as Carlos, who's my alter ego. Come on, Carlos, what are you going to do here? And what that does, it connects your old brains and your new brains and actually allows you to make decisions that are thought through and are actually going to serve you. And I think that sort of stuff is really important, because sometimes it's really easy to spiral when your bucket's full.
You've mentioned the word tribe a few times, and I love that term. The interesting thing about optometry is that for most practicing optometrists, they spend their entire day surrounded by people, whether that's the patient in the chair or the staff. We're around people all the time, but it's possible to be surrounded by people, but yet be incredibly lonely if we're
Yeah.
not making those connections. If it's in and out, bouncing from one room to the next, the relationships and the interactions start to feel very shallow. And with a lot of offices, if you're busy, you don't always have time to engage with the staff. And even if you
Mhm.
did, we're seeing more staff turnover and just not getting to really build relationships with the people around you. So it's probably something that you should work on. It's an area that I am really spending a lot of time with and working with our members too, is how I've always been interested in efficiency, but I've never been more motivated to try to work with other doctors, not just quote unquote efficiency because it's a good business practice, but rather give them that time back to focus more on the patient, whether that's through systems, whether we're seeing more practice use virtual assistants.
Mhm.
AI is a topic I'm really interested in. A little teaser here. I'm writing a new book on the topic, specifically how do we use new technology like AI to clear that time away so we can get back to focusing on the patient. But I do agree with you. The tribe is important, not just in the office, but being part of a group. I mean, maybe this will be a little plug for iDoc, but really
But
get
it should
out
be
of
a
the
plug for
exam room.
iDoc, man, because it's lonely doing it by yourself. And
Incredibly. Yeah.
yep, it's lonely at the top, and being able to talk to other people that are also in that same boat. That I don't know if you know much about Vivek Murtha, who was the Surgeon General of the United States for the last 5 years. I think he's just stepped down recently. But he decided he was going to go out and he wasn't going to have an agenda when he started. He just went out and said, I'm going to have a look and see what the biggest problem with health in America is. And he went around everywhere for a year. And he came back and his thing was that the problem is loneliness, that there are too many people disconnected. That whole autonomy and connection, we've doubled down on autonomy and we've let our connections go. And somewhere like iDoc gives you a really, really good, like I have no dog in this fight. I don't care whether iDoc goes great or not. But something like iDoc gives you a sense of community and a sense of I'm part of something bigger than me. And I've got people who I can help and people who can help me. And don't discount the how good it is from a stress relief to actually help someone else. Contribution is massive, and being able to help someone else is just a bigger stress relief as you being helped. But sometimes we don't notice who we're helping, and we don't do it deliberately. But
The,
iDoc does give you a really good community to be able to do that in.
the book I referenced before, Compassionomics, the author, I believe it's one of the reasons he wrote the book, was that that was the cure for him. He found that he was initially doing this for the patients. He realized he was getting burned out, stressed out, and he could feel he wasn't giving patients the level of attention, of compassion that he used to. And so he sought to sort of change the systems. But what he discovered was it didn't just improve things for the patient, it changed him. And he said, that's when I
Yeah,
started
wow.
to recover the joy and look at what is the reason for burnout. It's not always just getting away. I mean, sometimes we all need a vacation, but
Yeah.
it was getting back to the relationships and the connections with
Purpose.
people. And I'll say one more thing about the tribe and getting outside of the exam room, being part of a group that can help is the curiosity. I'm looking at the book cover right behind you in your
Yeah.
office there. Curious Habits. Love the word curiosity. And
Well,
once you're part of another
that's the
group,
third pillar of stress Teflon.
yeah,
You've got to have curiosity of what else can I do? How else can I do this differently?
and you have nobody
The
to
whole keep
ask.
doing the same thing.
Right. Outside of a tribe, you feel like you don't have anyone to ask. I mean, my goodness, for 10 years, I've been working with doctors, and so many of them, when they're new to the tribe, when they're new to the group, they realize, oh, wow, I've got exposure to different consultants, different people in the community. I love being a connector. I love saying, I don't have the answer to that, but let me hook you up with someone who does. And I think people are not aware of how many people around them want to help them. They just have to ask and get curious and ask questions. I think it's one of the most distinguishing factors between people that are successful and unsuccessful is not their knowledge, it's not their location, it's not their staff, it's not their technology. All those things are important, right? But it's the ones I find who struggle the most don't ask for help. And they try to do it all and on themselves. And I don't know about you, but I've only got so much limited knowledge between these ears here. And once I get around somebody else who knows something more about a topic, it's like the world opens up to you.
Get curious. Curiosity is it's just an amazing thing that the more, and that thing about connecting, the more curious you get with your staff on what they need and ask them the questions of what they need, not just tell them what you need. The more you get curious about the problems that your patients are having and how you can fix them, and even just be curious about them in general. And it opens up a whole world of connection and everything about modern society. And from what I read, in America, it's probably even worse than Australia, that the amount of people that have those strong connections is getting less and less with every generation. So even if it's just, I have a strong connection with my optometrist, then at least, you know, you, it's a, how can I put this? There's a business case for it. And I keep coming back to that. And it sounds really superficial and stuff. But if you need any incentive to actually connect with the people who are in that chair, not just the red eye in room two, the business case for it is massive. But the bigger case for it is that you'll actually be happy at doing it. If you sat there and concentrated on which one's clearer, number one or number two, optometry is ridiculously boring. But learning something about petunias is way more exciting than you'd think it is.
Yeah, I mean, just one of the many references from the book I'm talking about, because it's still on my mind, is something like 60 patients are 60% more likely to go along with your recommendations if they feel heard and understood. The book is about compassion,
Massively.
and we're not there, right? If we're pulled away, if we have that depersonalization with the patient and the patient feels it, they're looking at us like, maybe you are just trying to sell me something. Do I really need that second pair? Do I really need that additional lens coating? But when they feel heard and understood, they're considerably more likely to go along with our recommendations. So think of that both in terms of a clinical outcome, which we all want better clinical outcomes from our patients, but also the business outcome as well. Are they going to follow through? And at the end of the day, Luke, we can educate people till we're blue in the face. It's just a lot of words. Are they going to take action on what we're doing? Outcomes are really all that matters. It's the only thing that really defines our success is whether or not people take action on the things that we're asking them to do.
You have to think about it. For 27 years of optometry, someone walks in and the first sentence they say is, oh, and when you ask, what brings you today? They'll say, oh, I have to hold my arms a bit further away when I'm reading. And we know exactly what the problem is and we can fix the problem in a heartbeat. But that person hasn't felt heard. To be able to do a bit, I call it test room theatre. To be able to go, oh, really? So are you having to move it back? How far do you have to go before it goes? Ask 2 or 3 follow-ups. Then that person feels heard, even though you know exactly what's going on and you know they just need an extra plus 050 and they'll be fine. All right. But that test room theatre is real. And what test room theatre does, it makes the person sitting in the chair think, okay, Steve gets me. Steve understands what I'm going on about. This is not just the 4th time he's heard this today. He's actually listening to me. And there's something powerful about that they're hearing me. They need to be seen. I need to be heard. And even though you know what the solution is, and that part of it's probably not the most thrilling part of your day, you've got to make sure you see it through the other person's eyes and to be able to have that empathy and that understanding. I love the idea to always take 3 perspectives. You're going to have yours, you're going to have theirs, and to be able to see it from their point of view. And if you're just brush them away and say, yeah, I know how to fix that, and off you go, and haven't felt heard, they're not going to like it. And then you've got the bigger picture. And the bigger picture that I want to be part of this community, because that's what opticians should be. That's what optometrists should be. They should be part of a community. And so that little bit of test room theatre, to not just jump to the solution straight quick, to make sure that person feels heard, is a great way to get connection, to get that idea that, I'm part of this.
So I want to close out here with something you had said before. One of the keys initially is finding out what's causing the problem. Is it burnout? Is it boredom? How is it a mixture? What is leading to the problem? And there's a word we really haven't used here is depression. And
Mhm.
I was listening to a podcast actually earlier today, and it was a psychologist, and the topic was, how do I know if I'm burned out or if I'm depressed? And what she described was, if you're burned out, that will tend to go away or at least lessen when you remove the stressor. When you're
Yeah.
depressed, removing the stressor doesn't fix it. And so, for
Mm.
anyone listening to this, all these things are real. I never realized until I stepped away from patient care and started working with other doctors and hearing their stories, how many people were struggling. And it's always interesting because nobody ever calls me with their deep, dark secrets, but it's call two, it's call three. They start to open up about how much they're struggling emotionally in the practice. So, my hope here is anyone listening to this will understand that you're not alone and just get help. Reach out to a tribe, find friends. It may require you to see a doctor to, if you do feel like there's a sense of depression, but just don't go at it alone. It is so lonely in those four walls, but there's help
Yeah.
out there and you don't have to keep feeling that way. But it just takes you to take the step of saying, I'm not feeling great and I need some help
Got to
with this,
get
but reach
curious
out.
about how I'm feeling. If I get curious
Absolutely.
about how I'm feeling, am I connecting with people? Am I getting time outside? Am I exercising? Am I contributing? Am I helping people? Is the world a better place because I'm in it? That question is huge. And write down some things that you're grateful for. And all of that sounds very touchy-feely and all that sort of stuff, but it's true. And I'm not saying that you can cure depression just by going for a run and having a warm fuzzy feeling, but we've certainly got to do something. One of the problems with depression is that it makes you not want to move, and things like they know that exercise is a way better antidepressant than anything you can take chemically. So how are we doing that and those sorts of things? But I think noticing the good parts. One of the things about depression is you stop noticing, you stop smelling the roses, you stop seeing the kindness in the world, you stop noticing the really nice things, and you're only seeing the red iron room too. And I think to be able to just stop and get curious and get grateful about the good parts of being an optometrist and being able to sit down and connect, be where your feet are and connect with every person you see. I think that's probably the first step. And having the safety of a tribe is really important. Get curious about what you want to do next. But the first thing, no change starts without awareness. You have awareness, then you have options, and then you've got to do the thing that you need to do. And join something like IDOC and get that safety of a tribe. Have people around you who you can go to who can help, because they're there and people love to help, and let them. Don't sort of deny people the joy of letting them help. And I'm sure you love the joy of helping the doctors you work with, Steve.
Yeah, I found it in, once I stepped away from patient care, I thought, am I going to miss that side of it? But I've definitely found it in helping people in different ways.
Yeah, nice. And that's kind of what IDOC's all about. So it's the safety of a tribe, and we need that. And reach out to your tribe, even if it's someone you haven't talked to for 10 years. One of your friends, give them a call. Connect with people. We people need people.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the real conversation, real talk. I've been wanting to cover this topic for a while, so I'm really glad you took the time to share. And I know people got a lot out of this because I know that the struggling that's going on. I know burnout's real, bored out is real. Remember that word. Take a good look at what you really want. You need a challenge. I mean, I looking back now, I was like, yeah, that was a lot of it. I needed a challenge, but I really appreciate your time, and I'm going to go start putting names together for my own alter ego because you have one
All
that seems
right.
to work pretty. The better version
It
of
works
me.
great.
I'm going to come up with names, but thanks, man. Really appreciate your time. And
My
where can
pleasure,
wait?
Steve. Thanks
I
for
forgot to
having me.
ask. Where do people find your book, and where can they find out more about you?
Get my books on Amazon. You can find me at lukemathers.com.au, and there's a whole bunch of free stuff there. There's a couple of free downloads of books and stuff like that. So jump on there, and if you have a business and you need to run some stress resets or things like that, I can do that for you as well.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Steve. Great to see you.
Thanks to Luke, and thanks for everyone for listening. This is Steve Vargo, and we will see you in the next episode of Eye on a Business.